Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. Virginia and Dr. Cowden discuss parasites and their effect on the body, soul, and spirit. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
Good morning, Dr. Cowden. I'm so happy to see you.
Yeah, good to be seen.
We've been having an interesting conversation about Jonathan, Amanda, giving our listening audience context for my relationship with them and their role in R.E.S.T, and really the health of a family and the history, government, and education that took place in a family, and how important that history is, and how the history, not just of the couple, but of the family, and how they directed, regulated, governed themselves, controlled, restraint, and the consequence it had in their bodies, not just in the context of them individually, but their marriage and that of their ancestors. And it was fascinating to see that play out in disease states that showed up in Sweet Hudson when the conventional methods were exhausted all their resources. They saw functional neurologists and all kinds of specialists to determine what to do. I want you to kind of pick up a little bit, if you don't mind, in the context of what I just said, and tell us the role of parasites and their function and how they show up. With that, I'm just going to let you roll.
Yeah, very often when there's a condition that you can't figure out, a chronic condition that you can't figure out, there's a microbe in the body or a worm in the body that's contributing to that. And so if there is a unrecognized microbe or worm in the body causing the problem, until you identify that sufficiently and resolve it, you're not going to have a change in the chronic condition. Parasites, for example, can cause microscopic holes in the gut wall, and then that causes food allergy reactions, and that causes systemic reactions, histamine release, all kinds of symptoms: asthma, shortness of breath, a runny nose, swollen eyes, blah blah blah. And parasites can also do all of that just by staying in the gut, where they usually start. But they can spread from the gut to other organs and start creating other trouble. If the parasites migrate into the liver, you get a form of hepatitis. It's not a viral hepatitis like we're used to hearing, but it's a hepatitis nonetheless, and the liver can't function properly, so the liver can't detoxify the toxins that come in through the food, air, and water each day, can't detoxify the hormones that are made in the body that need to be detoxified, and so everything goes out of balance. Sometimes the parasites migrate into the spleen, and then that causes the spleen to start removing red blood cells from the circulation, because those parasites in the spleen are damaging the red blood cells as they go through there. And so more and more of the red blood cells get damaged and removed, and you develop an anemia, or you develop elevated ferritin levels, which then causes a body-wide free radical reaction. So it depends on where the critters go to, what kind of trouble you had. Many years ago, I was treating a rancher from West Texas. He had some, we call them light seizures. They weren't severe major motor seizures, but he was still having some symptoms that looked like seizures. And so when I did energetic testing, I found that he had parasites in his brain. And so I asked him a little bit about his history. What kind of water do you drink? And so on and so on. And the answer to that, he said, well, oftentimes I go mountain lion hunting, and I'm off far away from all types of civilization, and the only water I can find is a puddle with animal tracks in it, and so I drink that water so I don't die of dehydration. And I said, well, maybe that's where you picked up these critters. anyway, we identified by muscle testing the remedies that would likely get rid of the parasites in the brain. We had to add DMSO to the remedies he was taking in order to get them across the blood-brain barrier into the brain in sufficient amounts to kill off the parasites there. But anyway, once we did all of that, then he became free of all those neurological symptoms that he had prior.
What neurological symptoms did he have?
He was having some forgetfulness. He was already 80 years old, so but it was fairly sudden onset. And if you have Alzheimer's dementia, it doesn't go from black to white or great memory to poor memory in a few days like his did. It goes over many weeks or many months. So I said, no, there's something else going on. And he also had I think he said he had some weakness in one of his extremities. I can't remember which one it was, but anyway, he had more than one neurological symptom. And so I said, okay, well, you're either having little light strokes, little transient ischemic attacks, little mini strokes, or you have something else going on in there causing inflammation, causing the problem. And so when we did the muscle testing, it clearly showed that antiparasitic remedies would balance that out. An antiparasitic remedy will not balance out a TIA or light stroke, by muscle testing. That's not what you see. So I said, okay, well, you got parasites in there. And then I asked him his history, and he told me about drinking water out of mud puddles, basically. And I said, well, okay, so we're going to have to give you some parasite treatment.
How long did it take for him to heal?
Well, from that condition, probably 2 or 3 months, not very long. He also had colon cancer metastatic to his liver.
Do you energy test that?
Yeah. He had partial colectomy and removed a portion of his colon, and he had one round of chemotherapy. And he told me that he'd rather die than do another round of chemotherapy. So
sounds about right.
So that's why he came to see me. Basically, he wasn't concerned about his neurological stuff. He was concerned about what to do about this cancer in his liver. So anyway, I found that he had a root canal and a first or second molar, which is on the large intestine meridian. And I said, pretty sure that tooth's going to have to come out. And he had a couple of mercury amalgams. So I sent him to the biological dentist to get out the mercury amalgams first. And then after the mercury amalgams were removed, then he did the removal of the root canal tooth and cleaned out the socket. And then we did enzymes 30 minutes before food with water only. We did high dose oral vitamin C 3 or 4 times a day. I gave him a variety of other vitamin mineral supplements and some Chinese herbals. And in about 3 months' time, 3 or 4 months' time, he was free of cancer by energetic testing. So we repeated some of the conventional tests, and they were all normal. So by that time, his neurological symptoms had resolved. So we knew that it wasn't a metastasis of the cancer to the brain, because if it's a metastasis to the brain, the neurological symptoms won't go away.
Although we don't diagnose, treat, or cure ever, people can become educated about these modalities. So the energetic testing, for example, to determine, for example, if you have parasites or not and where, that's something that's accessible and learnable by everyone.
Yeah.
Would you explain energetic testing and then tell people how they can become educated?
Yes, there's a variety of energetic testings that are done, but none of those are done in allopathic hospitals in the United States. And it's very, very, very rare to find a medical doctor that knows any form of energetic testing, because it's not taught in medical school. I had to learn it away from medical school. And the reason it's not taught in medical schools is because energetic testing usually shows that pharmaceutical drugs are harmful rather than beneficial. Most university hospitals that teach medicine in the United States derive a significant amount of their money from grants that are given to them by pharmaceutical companies. And pharmaceutical companies basically say, you start teaching energetic testing, you'll no longer get any grants from us. Okay? So basically, they control the purse strings.
Right.
And so anyway, the form of energetic testing that's easiest to learn is electrodermal screening without probe testing.
electrodermal screening.
Right. Yeah. Without using a point probe on the acupuncture points like Dr. Voll in Germany did from 1950 till about 1980 when he passed on. But instead, using a device that measures the galvanic skin response, basically a lie detector test, but not for determining whether the person is speaking truth or not, but determining whether the person has a stress in their body because of a microbe, a toxin, a nutritional deficiency, etc. So, the device that I use most often now for that purpose is the Zyto, ZYTO Elite. When I got the Zyto Elite, it came with 10,000 testing items and 8 biosurveys, which is an automated testing process. And I thought that's a good start, but it wasn't sufficient from my perspective. So I added 17,000 additional testing items and 30 additional biosurveys. And so the people in the United States that have the Zyto Elite system and my software also loaded onto it will be able to get a lot of information with no technical skill. Okay. So, just have to push a button and wait for the answer to come out.
Well, you make it sound easy, but interpreting the information, the data that comes out is massive. Zyto is a well. So finding a Zyto practitioner, we do have one in-house, and we can do those scans if people get the hand cradle. But if you have, to our listening audience, if you're listening to this, you can find a ZYTO practitioner in your area, or if you're willing to get a cradle, we're happy to work with you. We do have all Dr. Cowden's protocols on there for Lyme and whatnot, and all these tests that he's added.
Well, the Zyto hand cradle, if you get a new one, is about $300, and if you get one used off of eBay, it might be as little as $50 to $100. But the nice thing about the hand cradle is that when you feel like you don't need it anymore, you sell it again on eBay, and so you rented it for a little while, so to speak. And the nice thing about the Zyto testing process is that you can do it from your clinic in California with any person anywhere in the world. So I've had some of the people that work with me test people from the United States. They are in the United States, but the patient that they were testing were in Dubai or Germany or England or India or other places. You don't have to be physically present with a person. The Ayurvedic doctor said if you want to get somebody well, you have to go to their house. Well, that's not always practical if they live in Dubai. Okay. So what you do instead is you go to their house virtually with a Zyto hand cradle. Okay. So years ago, I had a patient that was having a lot of symptoms, allergic type symptoms, and I did the Zyto, and it showed strong allergy to chickens. And I thought, chickens. So I asked this patient, do you have a chicken feather pillow? No. Do you have a chicken feather comforter? No. Do you have a chicken feather mattress and futon on your bed? No. So I'm perplexed about why you have such strong allergy to chicken. She said, maybe because I have a chicken in my house.
Wow.
She had a pet chicken in her house. So basically, I went to her house without having to go to her house.
Exactly. You figured it out. We
Yeah.
see that with the Evox, and mysteries are revealed very, very quickly. Tell us, if you could, how this system with a cradle works. What exactly is happening when I put my hand on that cradle? Would you just tell our listening?
I'm gonna grab my cradle and I'll show you. Okay. So that's what it looks like. So you see there's 6 electrodes here, one for each digit and one for the palm. So what happens with the testing process is that it tests the difference between these two in half a second, and then those two in half a second.
For those that are listening, it's the palm and the thumb, the palm and the index, right?
Yeah, let's say if you put your left hand on here, this would be the palm and the thumb. And then the next one would be the palm and the index, and the next one would be palm and the middle finger, and the next one would be palm and ring finger, and the next one would be palm and pinky finger. And it goes through that process every half second, changing to the next pair.
Wow.
And so it's testing 2 items per second, basically, two energetic items. So coming out of this device is a magnetic field that is representing a frequency of a microbe, a toxin, a vitamin, a mineral, a pharmaceutical, a body organ, a body tissue, etc. So it's testing every half second a new one. So I created a testing sequence that helps to go through what are the common stressors for the body, and then also what are the common balancers for those stressors. And then it compares, once it finds all the stressors, then it tests all the balancers, and then it comes the balancers to the stressors and figure out which ones of the balancers are really important to fix all the stressors. And so, you don't have to be a mental giant to figure all that part out. But as you say, there's a lot of data on one of these reports, and so you have to learn how to figure out what's important and what's not so important.
Get off social media. We can get off social media and stop watching so much TV and learn this stuff very quickly. It's fascinating because it's reasonable. It's congruent with laws of nature, observable natural things that are self-evident and speak to our natural affections. This is all accessible information. It's just going to tell you things that your body already knows it's carrying, and that is its history, how it's governed itself. And then you get to become educated as to this. And the reason I like to mention that over and over again is because that's the framework of rest. We invite people to displace confusion, chaos, and dis-ease in the spirit, the soul, or the body, doesn't matter. In this case, of course, we're talking about the body. And we take the same formula. We ask the same questions: what, when, where, how, why, right? Of what? Of history, how something's governing or governed, or what's the story and what are the dynamics around it. And then, of course, we become educated. We connect these narratives that our body's carrying with our soul, the experiences we've had, the things we think we remember, and of course, the information in this mysterious, beautiful quantum field of energy, which we call the spiritual realm, right? Certainly one way to understand it. And when we put these pieces together, it is amazing. It's like confusion, chaos, and dis-ease will collapse like a house of cards. It's unbelievable. And that's, I guess, why we can rest. Peace comes when we displace confusion, chaos, and dis-ease, and we step into these deep places of rest, which are alignment. And in this case, what Dr. Cowden's mentioning is when he's able to identify the insults in the body, this system, this biofeedback system, he's developed, he's added and collaborated with the Zyto team to supplement the basis of what they already had with many more fields to consider, to take into account. The combination of those things is just dynamic and a powerful tool in your hands to help yourself heal from spiritual, emotional, and physical problems. The physiology of this is kind of like a symphony. And I guess I want to invite everybody listening, because this can be overwhelming, Dr. Cowden. I've been listening to you for many, 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 many years, and you've been one of my mentors. I just love you to pieces, but I hear you speak now, and I see paintings, I hear music. I see it all as a symphony. But when you hear this stuff for the first time, it can be a little bit daunting.
Yeah. Well, we are not just a bag of bones or a bag of chemicals. Okay, we're very sophisticated machines, if you will, with, as you say, a body, a soul, and a spirit. And the allopathic medicine focuses only on the body, for the most part, in the United States. Some of the psychologists focus only on the soul, but the very superficial parts of the soul. And then the pastors and priests and other clergy focus on the spirit. They don't, none of them talk to each other. None of them.
You've got us all talking to each other.
Yeah, but for the most part, they haven't talked to each other for millennia, and they're just now starting to talk to each other a little bit. Okay, but it's still very, very lacking. So what we need to do is to learn the relationship between all those different parts. Okay, we need to see that the unresolved emotions can cause physical disease. Physical disease going on long enough can cause an emotion. Okay. Emotional stuff going on long enough can open up the spirit to demonic attack. Okay. And so on. So there's connection between the different levels of our being that we need
I
to
like to
recognize.
call our constitution. A constitution is a body. That's what the form definition of a constitution is. And that's it. Dr. Cowden is identifying that our very constitution is triune in nature, and communication among these parts becomes essential.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we rely a bit on ancient wisdom. For example, the Chinese have learned 1,000 years ago that if a person holds on to anger long enough, it'll create disease in their liver and their gallbladder and their bile ducts. If they hold on to fear long enough, it'll create disease in their kidneys, the urinary bladder, and sometimes in the genital organs. Sadness in the colon and the pancreas, fear of death in the lungs, and so on. So if you take that ancient wisdom and combine it with modern technology, you can get a lot of benefit to the client very quickly by simple techniques. For example, this same hand cradle can be used not just to do the electrodermal screening like we described and get information from the patient from what we call galvanic skin response testing with energetic items being broadcast from the hand cradle into the patient's hand. But you can also put a headset on like I have on right now and have the patient speak into the microphone with their eyes closed, a few word, a word or repeatedly, or a few words repeatedly for about 15 or 20 seconds. And while they're with their eyes closed, they're visualizing a person or an event. And so after just 15 or 20 seconds, you can see displayed on the computer screen 144 different emotions that are connected to that person or that event. And you can see that some of them have no significant effect at all, and some have a whole lot of effect, and some of them are in between. And so once you see that on the screen, once the patient sees that on the screen, their brain starts trying to do some processing and resolving, because what was previously unaware has become aware. They were not aware of their emotions, and they see it on the screen. They say, "Oh, I didn't realize I have that emotion about that person or that event." And so then they start doing some processing. But the machine goes beyond that, and it takes the person's own voice and converts it into a homeopathic-like energy. We'll have to talk about that in a minute. And the homeopathic-like energy is delivered back into the patient's hand with their hand on the hand cradle while they're listening to pleasant instrumental music. The purpose of the music is to distract their brain so that their brain can receive the energy coming from their hand. And that energy of their own voice, or a form of it, coming back into them from the hand cradle, will shake loose from the cells the cellular memory that's causing the mental, emotional, or physical condition. And so in about 2 more minutes, you have enough shaking loose from the cells, the cellular memories, so that all of a sudden you switch from illness into health. You start making that transition quickly.
And the body detoxes in real time right there.
Yeah. So you start moving from illness toward health in a very short period of time. In about 2 minutes is all it takes. And so the results we see with that are phenomenal. But again, you determined from that process the emotions that are affecting that person related to each person or event in their life. And so if you see that they have a whole lot of unresolved stuff with their dad, then you do a lot more evox work, it's called, with dad until there's no longer really strong signals, emotional signals coming from the evox testing related to dad. And then you move on to another person or another event.
And I want to interject a thought here that's very important. And the fruit of that information explains to us very much the very practical external things that a person is carrying. However, I want everybody to know that we look at things in layers here. This helps us peel back all the insults, if you will, get rid of all the brush so that we can begin to access the internal with more integrity, the mind, the heart, the will, the conscience, the feelings of a person. So as we clear this obstruction, then we're able to go into the internal cause. For example, Dr. Cowden just mentioned the emotions. That's external. The emotions are feelings in motion. That's external. That is very accessible to us. It's self-evident to many of us. But the root cause of those emotional states are a little bit more mysterious. But we're able to engage our clients, my first responders. It's fantastic to watch this happen with our team of first responders that we serve, because we're quickly able to get into the mysteries, the root cause, and the narratives and the stories behind those emotional states. And that's the mystery of the success that we have with R.E.S.T. R.E.S.T is a bridge from all this technology, all this information, all these biometrics, the things Dr. Cowden's talking about. But we do not stop there. We go into how the history of these things, the philosophy, what's true and what's not, the theology, what is the narrative of design and all this stuff, of how the soul works through the brain in the body. So we take this information that Dr. Cowden is talking about into a very personal, intimate, concise, directed conversation by the story of each individual and what they bring to bear in that appointment. So that's why we do not diagnose, treat, or cure. We don't have to. We don't need to. We believe there's a superior method to facilitate healing. We have a lot of data. We have a data-driven, evidence-based program now. That's what R.E.S.T has become, because we take this information as a starting point, but you individually are able to, through this data and this information and through these 9 modules of our R.E.S.T program, we're able to transform that into gardens. I love the theme of Hudson, and I want to finish with this story, Graves to Gardens. From graves to gardens, that's exactly the transformative process and the transformative consequence of bridging this information, all the medical data. I like how you referenced ancient wisdom and knowledge and information partnered with technology now, coupled with technology. It's amazing what we can do. And if you have the courage to step into R.E.S.T, to recognize that, hey, I am in a state of confusion, chaos, and dis-ease spiritually, psychologically, and physically, then boy, the world and everything beautiful in it is at your disposal, because you will see the beauty in the ashes of your life. Anyway, I had to throw that in because Dr. Cowden, nobody explains the scientific part of this like you do, in my opinion, because you're a great man of faith. You understand the value of the soul and you understand the anatomy of the soul, but obviously your genius is in your profound understanding of the body and how they all knit together. And I just can't say thank you enough.
Many years ago, somebody that didn't know I was a doctor said, "What business are you in?" I said, "I'm in the failure business." And he said, "Failure business?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I treat the failures of other doctors."
I might have to use that.
Yeah. But another doctor one time asked me, "What kind of medicine do you practice?" I said, WWM. WWM? Never heard of that. I said, "What works medicine?"
Okay, I'm quoting you on those things.
It's really important for your listeners to understand that we are, all our parts are connected together. And the part that a lot of people don't understand very well at all is that the feelings and emotions that impact us the most are those that we're not aware of, those that we acquire when we're young children or that we acquire while we're in the womb. And unless you identify and resolve those emotions, then the person is going to continue to have whatever problem they have on a physical level or a mental, emotional level or a spiritual level or all three. And so the analogy that I make to people that have that situation going on with a lot of buried subconscious feelings and emotions is that if they're 50 years old, they're standing in the 50th floor of their multi-story building. And they're there with their psychologist because they recognize there's something that needs to be taken care of, but they just don't know for sure what. And the building is swaying like this because the ground is unstable and there's an earthquake going on. And so the patient and the psychologist are rearranging the furniture on the 50th floor, figuratively.
Good analogy.
But the building's still swaying like this. So the patient recognizes, I need to go down to one of the lower floors. So they go down to the first, second, or third floor, which is the first 3 years of your life, and they start doing some structural work there. And they find that even though the earthquake continues, the building is not swaying as much as it was. And they say, oh, we're making some headway here. Once they do all the work they can do on the first and second and third floor, the building's still swaying. So they said, I think I need to go to the basement. So they go to the basement. That's where the parents live. Okay. And so they do some structural work there, and the building sways even less, but it's still swaying. They say, I think I need to go to the sub basement. That's where the grandparents live. And so they do some structural work there. And now there's just very little sway to the building. They say, what if I go to the sub basement where the great grandparents live? And they do that, and all of a sudden the building is just rock solid steady, even though there's still an earthquake going on outside. They said, okay, now I'm going to go back up to the 50th floor and I'm going to rearrange the furniture, and I won't have to keep rearranging it.
By the way, everybody listening, we always talk about R.E.S.T being a data-driven, evidence-based program, but the solutions we propose or we ask you to consider are all substantiated by laws of nature, self-evident truth, and natural affections. And what Dr. Cowden just explained is the philosophical and the practical application of what we do at R.E.S.T. That's why we fix other people's failures, because they're still doing all the work from the 50th floor. And with Jonathan and Amanda systematically, that's exactly what I do when I sit down and meet with people. It's not that we want you to hang on to things that are past or revisit trauma. We want you to understand the merit and the value of the structural work that needs to be taken into consideration that's afflicting you in ways you don't understand, and it's showing up in your body.
Yeah. A lot of patients resist doing any kind of psycho-emotional work because they think it's going to be too painful to relive those things, especially men. Men are worse about that than women are. But the really nice thing about the EVOX work, which you could do with a hand cradle and the headset like I've got on, is that it's a painless process for the most part. To go through any painful memories, you're just replaying it in your mind while you're listening to some pleasant music, and it's not painful. And so that's why I would encourage people to go that route, to do a big part of the cleansing, healing of the feelings and emotions before they go into the more refined parts of work that you can do with the R.E.S.T and with recall healing and all that other stuff.
I think the joy for all of us, those listening, and certainly is for me, is the opportunities we have to engage our medical practitioners, our doctors and whatnot, with questions, with curiosity and wonder and deep conversations about the things we experience as we heal and as we help people heal. It really is a beautiful thing to step into these collaborative relationships and all do what? Live R.E.S.T together. We're reconciling the confusion, chaos, and dis-ease and learning to talk to each other. I love how you explained that. I appreciate how you explained that, because that's really all this is we're breaking down barriers to communication among our own constituents that make up our body, between us, each other, in interpersonal relationships, but also in professional relationships, because the neurologist, fantastic, her wonder, her awe, her enthusiasm, with the things she's learned, because Jonathan and Amanda were so gracious and thoughtful in how they considered everything she told them to do, and yet invited her to not despair by panicking or insulting her when nothing was working, and invited her to the journey of healing with Hudson. And she was so humble and beautiful and curious as well. And so we are all the better for it. So she's so excited to work with me. But there's this beautiful thing that begins to happen, and we begin to, all of us in our current state, we become instruments of healing through these conversations in this national dilemma we find ourselves in. And our nation is sick, emotionally, spiritually, physically. But if we can begin to understand what the rhythm of rest is, it's to displace confusion, chaos, and dis-ease. And if the only thing you remember was Dr. Cowden's analogy of the 50-story building, that's a beautiful way to begin to wrap your mind around what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I really admire that functional neurologist. I think she, as you say, is very open-minded and very caring. And I believe that if you have those two qualities, that you can learn the other things that you might not know at the moment, and then start applying those as appropriate in your life and in the lives of your clients, your patients. Dr. Alan McDonald opened my eyes in 2019 to something that I was unaware of up until that point, other than this rancher I was talking about in West Texas. But Dr. McDonald did a study where he collected the cerebral spinal fluid and the brain tissue of people that had died with different neurological conditions. He collected those from the pathology bank in Denver, Colorado, and he analyzed those cerebral spinal fluids, the fluid that came out of the puncture of the lumbar puncture from the brain. And what he found was a little roundworm about a 16th of an inch long and just a little bit thicker than a hair, tiny, tiny worms in the cerebral spinal fluid. And 10 out of 10 patients that had died with multiple sclerosis, 5 out of 5 patients that had died with Alzheimer's dementia, 4 out of 4 patients that had died with glioblastoma multiforme primary brain cancer. So wow. It was present in 100% of the samples that he evaluated, those 19 samples. And he retired from practice soon after that. So, it would have been great for him to have done that with ALS and Parkinson's and lots of other conditions. But, I'm convinced that little roundworm is present in the brain of a lot of people that have neurological conditions. So if Dr. McDonald hadn't enlightened me in 2019, then I would have a gap in my knowledge. Dr. McDonald did microdissection of the worms that he found in those 19 patients, and he found inside the worms Borrelia, Bartonella, Babesia, and almost all of them. Okay, inside the worms. Okay, so what Dr. McDonald...
Lyme, isn't that the constitution of some Lyme disease as well?
Yeah. Borrelia is thought to be the primary cause of Lyme disease, but the Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, Coxiella are other microbes that are considered co-infections with Lyme disease. And the reason they're called co-infections is because very often when a person gets bitten by a tick or another biting critter, mosquito, we know that Lyme disease can be transmitted not just by ticks, but also by mosquitoes, lice, fleas, mites, scabies, etc. So all of those can transmit the Lyme-related creatures into a person. Dr. McDonald found those smaller creatures inside most of the worms. Okay? And so that means that he said, and I believe he's true, that every time those worms pooped in the brain, they released those smaller creatures back into the brain, which kept the inflammation going. Every time those worms died in the brain, they don't live forever. When they die in the brain, they release those smaller creatures back into the brain, cause more inflammation.
And I'd like to interject a thought at this juncture, because I'll never forget, Amanda called me and asked me to go deep into a Zyto narrative around Mom who'd passed away. and who's one of my patients. So big history, long history. I have a lot of context for the entire dynamic, family dynamic. And right when I hung up with her, I think we did it in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, lots of tears, lots of stirred up emotion, but we got to it very fast. We can be very strategic with this now. And I'll never forget, I said to her tonight when he falls asleep, going to his room, and you declare these truths that we were able to identify over him. They're not his burden. They're not his story. They're your story. They're mom's story. And grace covers all of that because we're all in this same play together, right? And she did. The only thing I told her to do different was to extend her hands, because now I'm seeing the power of the hands, which I want to talk to you about all this later on for another segment, if you could. But I remember specifically, even right now as I speak to you, when I went like this, Dr. Cowden, my hands began to vibrate so powerfully with so much intensity that now I've developed the ability, right, or the discipline, whatever you want to call it, or awareness of the power of a touch, the power in the hand. And what we do with our hands, how important it is. But I remember specifically adding that to the protocol and putting your hands just a few, whatever, just over him at whatever capacity. And she did, after months of parasitical treatment that were not releasing from his body, so completely spot on in the emotional and spiritual constitution of why his sweet little conscious, subconscious, and unconscious mind was holding on to something we didn't understand. And when she went and laid hands over him, literally, and basically declared in the form of a prayer those things that were true in the spiritual realm, and they were all affirmative in nature, but they were declarations, not affirmations. And those declarations, I'm telling you, that next morning, I think within a very short order after waking up, he began, after months, to release those parasites. And by the hundreds of thousands, I think this little boy has been releasing parasites ever since. And when the episodes repeated themselves about 2-3 weeks later, and it wasn't of any kind of intensity, but had minor little seizures, it was amazing because the eggs now are hatching. So we have to go after those things too. And it was a beautiful thing to watch. It was almost like watching this beautiful painting unfold. And I wondered what would happen if we began to look at our disease state with curiosity and kind of as a project. Curiosity about the things we're going to get to learn in the painful disease states we find ourselves in, or our children find themselves in. But what would happen if we looked at it as a canvas, if we looked at it as an invitation and to begin to collaborate and learn new things from each other? And then I wonder what would happen if we had the conviction and the patience and the faith and the belief that we could step into this rest, this realm of rest, with our curiosity, knowing that everything is meant to function in balance, harmony, and coherence. And between each other, within each other, among each other, we can solve, we can facilitate healing. I just wonder what would happen to our listening audience. I know what's happened between and among us, Dr. Cowden, but I wonder what would happen if we embrace the discipline of saying, wow, no matter what I'm facing, the greatest leader that ever lived, the greatest thinker that ever lived, invited humanity into these places of rest. And it was by, according to the counsel of the collaboration that people had, but according to the counsel of his will, with the collaboration of the individuals he healed, man, miracles happened. Miracles were performed. But he always asked people, are you willing? Are you willing? What do you want? What is it you want from, you know what I mean? Because that human collaboration was important for him to even facilitate and do the miracles he did, right? Because we know that because of unbelief, he was restricted to do some of the things that he did in other places. But I'm thinking, gosh, we're made in his image, spirit, soul, body, right? And we're invited to these experiences. So in closing, would you wrap up my enthusiasm, what's before us for me, and clean up everything I just said, would you?
Yeah, well, in James, in the Bible, James 5:16 says, as believers, we're to lay hands on the sick and pray for them that they will be healed. It doesn't say that they may be healed, but that they will be healed. Okay. And so if we have no doubt when we lay hands on and pray that they will be healed, then it will be so. Okay? Jesus said, greater things will my believers do than I have done. And he did some amazing things, raised people from the dead and healed people that have been blind since birth and healed people that have been sick or crippled all their life. So we're supposed to be able to do the same thing as believers.
The people that are receiving the healing have to be willing and desire, because in a lot of those cases, he involved them in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So when Jesus went to Nazareth, where he was raised, he stood in the temple and spoke. And basically, they said, isn't that just the son of the carpenter? And he realized that because of their belief, or their lack of belief, that he needed to dust his feet off and move on to the next town, which is what he did. Okay? So there's a story about a man who brought his son to be healed from seizures to the apostles in Mark chapter 9. And that the apostles had no effect on the seizures. And then Jesus walked up, hadn't been around there, but he says, what's going on here? He knew what was going on, but he wanted to know what everybody was going to say. And the father said, your apostles couldn't heal my son of his seizures. If you can, then do so. And Jesus said, if I can? And the father recognized his mistake. So he said, yes, I believe. Help me with my unbelief. Okay? And so, we're all given a measure of faith according to the word, and we all have a certain amount of unbelief because of the things of our life. And it's kind of like the scale that's in the courtroom. Which way is the balance gonna tilt? If you got too much unbelief, then it wins out. If you got too much, if you got excessive faith, then it's going to win out, even if you have a lot of unbelief. So we need to ask God for more faith and take down our unbelief. But the other thing about Jesus's miracles, one of his miracles was encountering a fellow that had been demonically possessed and lived in a graveyard, and came out, and Jesus said to the demons that were in him, "Get out of him." And the first thing he said is, "What is your name?" And the man said, "I am Legions." Okay, so that meant he wasn't just one demon in there; he was a lot of demons in there. And so Jesus said, "Come out of him, legions." And then the demonic man said, "Can I go into that herd of pigs over there?" "Yep, go ahead, go." Is all he said, "Just go." And so all of a sudden, this man was no longer demon possessed, but the pigs became crazy and ran over the edge of a cliff and fell into the ocean and drowned. And that didn't make Jesus very popular with the people of the town, so he got run out of town for causing all the pigs to die. But the man was set free from demonic possession, and that probably was what they should have focused on instead of the fact that the pigs died.
The economy of heaven is grace. The currency of time is money. They saw their a crash. They saw financial crash, and they missed the true wealth and the true resource that we have is this unmerited favor, this power and authority to command darkness that is physically, emotionally, and spiritually destroying us. And imagine that they couldn't even bask with gratitude in the wonder of what one man had the capacity to do. Instead, the attention immediately shifted into what it cost them. Let's all be careful to weigh the cost of everything we do.
Yeah. Anyway, the reason I relate that story is because I personally believe that the worms in our bodies oftentimes are demonically possessed. And as long as you don't do anything on a spiritual level, it's going to take a lot of time, money, energy, effort to get those worms to leave. But because of what Amanda did in the way of a declaration prayer, she was able to basically command the demons to leave those worms. And so the worms no longer had the power or the strength to remain. So they started leaving like they should.
Months ago, I did an interview with a psychiatrist that worked in the largest mental institution in the country, who to my knowledge is not a believer, but he observed a law of nature. And he calls them energetic parasites. And he began to see that these parasites, energy zappers, energy vampires. And while speaking to him, I realized that what parasites do to the body, demons do to the psychology, to the soul, the mind, the heart, the will, the conscience of a person. They cripple them. And I was fascinated by his academic rendition of these energetic parasites because he was able to take measures of authority, and he saw measures of healing just by being able to identify the reality of what you just said. And he just explained it all in the form of energy. So there is this beautiful linear scientific approach to understanding these things. Because when you mention demons and parasites and all that, people might become a little bit uncomfortable and say, well, that's a bridge too far, a step too many for me. But when you really understand that rest is science, it was Catherine Dang that said, rest is science because science is truth. I'm reminded of this conversation with Dr. Jerry because he identified the truth outside of the faith, religion orientation, but he identified the scientific truth of these energetic parasites and how debilitating and destructive they were in the life of these inmates.
Yeah.
The psychiatric hospital he said I lived in was more like a prison. In Georgia, 10,000 beds. And I said, it sounds like a prison. Right. It's an emotional prison. What's that? Enslavement. We find ourselves enslaved. So in the course of my conversation with him, I was able to stick to the science track of everything he was saying because I have a lot of data, a lot of evidence to substantiate the merit of his energetic vampires. Except one thing, I have a theology that I can attach with it because of the teaching of well-documented in ancient documents that those things have a name. Father of lies, the author of confusion that comes to kill, steal, and destroy, and uses the means of these, what he calls energetic parasites, I call demons. And whether we talk the voice of science, the voice of religion, if you will, the voice of faith, I'm more comfortable with, and the voice of just truth, which I think is Jesus, because nobody spoke to healing and deliverance and to these laws of nature that we find in medicine like he did. And in functional medicine, we see the consistency of these very effective methods of healing as we get to the root cause of disease. And they're all consistent with his teaching. And I don't find that in any other world religion. And the reason this becomes really important to me, because I came to faith as an atheist. And I came to faith because I reasoned through the Federalist Papers. And when I saw the Federalist Papers, I came to faith in the teachings of Christ because I realized he ushered in the language of liberty. Well, liberty is an antithesis of enslavement. And so you start putting all these things together, and all of a sudden, these conversations of history, government, direction, regulation, control, and restraint, and education, they're all so interrelated. And in measure, it's kind of connecting you with Dr. Jerry, with me and my curiosity. And you guys have filled in a lot of gaps, but the real teaching that brings everything together to me, having, by the way, read the Quran and the Book of Mormon and these other significant works of religious doctrine, right, of antiquity, having read them and understanding and being curious, I find that it's a comprehensive teaching of the scriptures, the Holy Scriptures, that really most accurately and comprehensively speak to the human condition and the challenges we face. By the way, nobody's put that together for me like you have, Dr. Cowden, and I thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah, so some people that are listening may find it, an interesting article that I put on my personal website. It's called "What is Spirituality?" And that's an important pursuit because a significant part of our being is spirituality. I believe that the spirit will remain after our physical body dies, and so it's important to try to understand that part of our being as much as we can.
I'd like to post that as the exclamation point to this discussion, because the spirit is eternal and everything else is temporal.
That's
and the
right.
soul of the man. Wow, that's the beautiful canvas that God weaves together with our spirit, and it's the mystery. So I want to invite everyone in closing, be curious, be curious. Some things you've heard today might make you mad. Some things might make you more confused. Other things may make you curious. But wherever you find yourself, wow, step into the mystery of wonder. Just wonder. And then go check and test everything we've said and everything we've shared, and go do your homework. You have this beautiful, beautiful university in YouTube. Some of the greatest minds and thinkers, and the things they're putting out there are just amazing. We're living in an amazing time in the history of the world. And as a nation, I want to just close by saying we are blessed. We are blessed to live in America. And let's not squander our inheritance, however it came to us. Perhaps through immigrant parents, perhaps because generations have been here. But either way, just delve deep into with wonder and curiosity about the things that are causing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease in your life.
Yep.
Dr. Cowden, we love you. We appreciate you. I say from the bottom of my heart, with so much love and affection, I would not be seeing the transformation in the lives of those we serve to the extent that I am without your love for us,
Yeah.
your faith, and your commitment to mentor me and help me display so much ignorance in my own life. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah. Well, I want you to know that I love and appreciate you, and I'm really glad that you're continuing to pursue the teaching that you're teaching, because it's a very important piece.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you.
We hope listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to Rest with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.